meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. All persons wishing to attend the virtual meeting may do so via YouTube Sumter School District Board Meetings and Sumter School District's Facebook page. Due to COVID-19 and in compliance with recent public health orders, no members from the public will be able to attend the meeting in person. The mission of Sumter School District is to equip students to be responsible, successful, and productive citizens in a global society. Sumter School District develops and cultivates competitive students who embrace diversity, act responsibly, and contribute positively to society. This afternoon, we have Brian L. Austin, yours truly, as the chairman, Reverend Darrell F. McGaney, Mrs. Cheryl Ray, and Dr. Gloria R. Lee, our illustrious superintendent, Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, and our administrative manager, Amy Hanson. At this time, will you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to our Sumter School District community, to our policy meeting for this afternoon. We have some items to discuss this afternoon, and I hope we're not here too long, but we will get started with the approval of the agenda. If there's no objections to the agenda, it will stand approved. Hearing none, the agenda stands approved. We're down to
executive session.
Item 3, which is executive session. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we enter into executive session for the purpose of discussion regarding the development of security personnel or devices.
Is there a second?
Second. We can just vote by show of hands.
I'm going to vote by show of hands.
Unanimous.
It's unanimous. The committee will now enter into executive session for the discussion regarding development of security personnel or devices. The committee is now back in open session, and we're down to item 5, review of policies and possible amendments. 5.1 is a review prior to board second reading of SCASPA policy and legislative updates, GBGAB, lactation accommodation, GCOA, evaluation of instructional staff, ACB, educational equity, ACE, service animals, GBGAA, service animal staff, IMG, animals in schools, and JLCDD, service animal students. Is there any discussion or any amendments prior to the board's second reading on those policies?
No, I was only gonna ask about the title of the policy for service animals. And I think to be relevant to the work of today, that it should read emotional support animals, because service animals just sound as if it's for those who have a visual impairment or a hearing impairment. But when we know that there's emotional support, I believe that the title needs to align to it being emotional support / service animal.
Committee members, comments on? You said service / support animals?
Emotional support / service.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on the aforementioned policies prior to second reading? Hearing none, we're at 5.2, review prior to board second reading on model policy BEDL, board members and electronic communication. Any discussion on amendments to this policy prior to second reading?
The policy itself, I think, is clear cut now. When we talk about electronic communication, we're talking about, you know, phones and watches and anything that we can communicate. We know we have our laptop. Sometimes even a laptop, you can communicate with these computers as well. So I know, I think the policy itself is clear cut and everything is in it. However, we did have some discussion about people may be looking for emergency calls. Did we talk about that too? I mean, should we elaborate or should we clarify? You never know when somebody may get an emergency call and have to pick up the phone and use it. My question is, we just don't wanna just come out and say, oh, we got an emergency call, and that's still an opportunity to text on what's going on in open session.
No, they gotta excuse themselves.
Right, so that's why I say, should we have some kind of discussion or elaborate on that?
Well, I think the policy serves as a guide. There's no way for us to dictate when a person uses their phone or not, and I think as a member of the board and as a member of this body, that we should conduct ourselves in a way that's with honor and integrity, but at the same time, well, I mean, we all have personal lives outside of being a member of this board, and so there could be times when you may have to take a call or something. And I think that this policy just talks about the appropriateness of putting your phone aside during the board meeting. It's not saying that, oh, you're gonna be punished for using it, even though it is inappropriate to use the phone. I think that, I mean, we all sit around this dais are all adults, so we should know that if we have a personal call, to excuse yourself, like Dr. Lee said, excuse yourself, and not to conduct or to engage in conversations with individuals that are not a part of this board, or a part of this body, or members of the public when it's inappropriate.
And I think that's the important thing is that to be aware that even though it's your personal phone, it is subject to FOIA. That was the point of the
Yep.
policy. You gotta
Right.
be careful who you're communicating with.
During
And,
meetings.
yeah, whether it's, using it for board business and, making sure you're appropriate.
And I think since our meetings are being held virtually, it's broadcasted to the public virtually, I think that we have to be mindful that the public can see our behavior during our committee meetings, during our regular board meetings, our work sessions. They can see us, and I think if we're going to implement a policy, then we should set the example, because it's hard for us to sit around this dais as board members and implement policies and try to enforce policies on our students and our staff, and we're not being held to the same standard.
And we should be held. That's my reason for want to elaborate, Mr. Chairman, because there has been times during our meetings, texts have come in through phone. And that should not be.
So do you think we should maybe add language about if you have to take a call or something to excuse yourself?
Excuse yourself.
Or if an emergency arises?
Emergency, excuse yourself. Phone silence, but if emergency, you may be expecting a call. And you have to excuse yourself, but, for the most part.
There is language what is the language that we use for when a board member is virtually, that we do when we're going into executive session?
Correct. I know what you're talking about.
That language.
It's also, I would act for the sake of us reviews. Would you read that?
Yes. When the board enters into executive session, the chair of the board reads a statement, and the statement reads, prior to entering executive session, board members will be asked to expressly affirm that appropriate precautions to safeguard the privacy and integrity of the closed session, including but not limited to precautions that will reasonably ensure that a closed session is not being recorded without the board's permission and that no unauthorized person can hear or access the discussions or other confidential information. The chair may take the responses to the request for such affirmations into account in determining whether to enter or to potentially postpone the executive session. I think if we include some language like
Yeah.
this to this policy, about safeguarding our meetings and
Confidentiality.
the integrity of our meetings.
Yeah,
That's one.
I'm good with that. So,
Is there any other discussion on it or
no,
suggestions, Ms. Ray? Or Megan?
I'm good with that.
Dr. Lee?
Good with that.
Dr. Morales, you're fine with it. Okay. So we will amend this policy to include language from this statement in that policy prior to our board meeting. We're now down to 5.3, review of sample policy ACA and ACAR equity. And I'll start discussion on this. As I previously stated, we currently do not have an equity policy, and I think this is an opportunity for Sumter School District to shed light on the equity issue and to be one of the first, to call themselves one of the first in the state to implement a policy that's very much so needed. And I know when we have conversations around equity, we get caught up on race and sex and those things, but we have to look at equity through a macro lens, and we have to look at equity to include our students that are in poverty, our students that are homeless. We have to look at our English language learner students as well as a part of the equity conversation. And we can't look at it through a micro level because our mission goes back to we're cultivating students to be global citizens. And our students are going to encounter people from all different walks of life, and I think this is an opportunity for us to shine light on it and to make sure that we're affording not only our students but our staff as well with a policy that they can be governed by. And all of us that sit around this dais, with the exception of Dr. Martin Knox, attended a conference, and a lot of the conference workshops were surrounding equity and cultural competency, inclusion, and getting to know your students. And I think this is the prime time for us to look at that and to come up with some policy that addresses equity in our school district. And even when we look at school report cards, we see where we have issues, some issues that arise, but I think that a policy is not gonna solve all of those issues, but it will give us the vehicle to drive the conversation, and it will give us an opportunity to address those issues.
Concur, Mr. Chair, I concur.
Any discussion per se? I would like to ask the administration as well as members of this committee to look at the policy, the sample policies that have been developed or that's being implemented in the neighboring districts, and just start drafting some language that you would like to include in a policy for Sumter School District. And I think that between the administration and the policy committee, I think that we should be able to marry the two ideas together and come up with a policy that could work for our students, our staff, as we move forward in this work.
Is there a timeline?
Not, oh, sorry.
Well, I know that our superintendent is hard at work for the students and the community, but I don't want to put a timeline on you to put you under pressure to do anything. What do you think is a reasonable amount of time that you would need to get together with your team to come up with some ideas?
And so, in looking at an equity policy, I would like to make sure that I have multiple voices at the table. And that includes teaching staff, professionals from the principals, assistant principals, and executive staff. I think it's most important even to have a parent to have this conversation, because as you said, equity encompasses just so much, and I would not want to hastily come together, just to throw something together, but making sure that it is meaningful and sustainable, as we continue to move forward in this work. So to answer your question, what's a nice time frame? Can I get until like maybe the second policy meeting after today to bring back the frame?
Sure. And I think in the interim, we as policy members can work on things and come up with some ideas ourselves, so that once we get to that second policy meeting from today, we can actually look at what each one of us brings to the table, as well as what the administration is bringing to the table. If that's okay with you all.
One question
Yes, sir.
for clarification. When we talk about equity, are we talking about equity in terms of all kids having access to programs and opportunities and all that good stuff? All kids?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All students and all staff as well, because I think you can't do this work with just addressing one segment of the population that we serve.
I just want to make
Yes,
sure,
sir.
when you say equity, when we talk about equity, are we talking about all kids having access and opportunity of everything?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I'm glad you brought that point up, because a lot of times we try to use equity and equality interchangeably, and you can't use them interchangeably. Federal and state law says that we're entitled to equal access to public education, but just because we're entitled to the same thing, I may need more support than the next student.
That's right.
And that's where you get into the work of equity, and actually equity and justice, and making sure they have education justice. So making sure that all students have access to the resources, or make sure they have the environment that's going to provide the best education opportunities for them.
Roger that.
Any other discussion on 5.3? Hearing none, we will move to 5.4. Review of policy KLGA, school resource officers. And with the review of policy KLGA, just say that I think it's the consensus of this body to allow the administration, of course with the assistance of the board whenever needed or applicable, to further the dialogue between our school resource officers and administration and stakeholders in our community to address this issue. Did I get that, capture that correctly?
Let the superintendent, let's allow the superintendent to meet her and her staff, to meet with the key players in the community that we talked about earlier, and maybe come back with some recommendation.
Is there any more discussion on 5.4, review of policy KLGA, school resource officers? Hearing none, we're down to 5.5, review temporary suspension of BEDH, public participation at meetings.
Who put that on there?
Prior to the pandemic, our regular meeting agendas included public participation. The Board of Trustees received a legal advisory from the South Carolina School Board Association on March 17th that included the following: if your board policy allows for public comment, the board should make a motion and approve the temporary suspension of the associated policy. For most districts, this will be policy BEDH, public participation at meetings, until the COVID-19 threat has ended. Now open up the floor for discussion on this policy.
There ain't no discussion. The COVID-19 hadn't ended yet.
Well, I think that we might want to look at having some public participation. Now, at the conference we went to, most of the districts were doing it in some form or fashion. You know, they had it where they could send, emails or phone calls, some of them went as far as they'd even let people come in, they limit. If you wanna come address the board, they had some of them sitting outside and you could come in one at a time and that sort of thing, so, you know, I think that's something, of course, we don't have to have it, but that's something that we had gotten the public used to, so I'd like to see us get back to some form of it. We're looking at going back to schools now, and you know, the elementary kids are going 4 days a week, so, I think we need to open up some too.
Well, I disagree with you, Ms. Ray, and I'll say, I disagree with that. I'll tell you what, I do agree maybe we should, I wouldn't be opposed to, emails and letters if they wanna submit something for us to read or something like that, to
Or they
give
could
them some
come
type
by phone.
by phone. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but what I am opposed to is people still dying, and I say that with no disrespect. People, in my eyes, people still dying, and it's no joke. And I don't know who are gonna come in here. In fact, I don't know who are in here. I don't know, and I'm not trying to be funny.
No, but.
This thing, I personally, I rather the numbers go down because I still see the numbers stagnant and people still.
Well, and I didn't say it had to be in person, but we need to open it up some kind of way.
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to that, open it up some kind of way, but I am opposed to people coming in here, because in my mind, when they come in here, they may be in attack mode, and this is not the time for no rowdy crowd. That's just me.
If I could make a suggestion, the public voice is definitely warranted. They're one of our key stakeholders. And I think that every decision that we make, I mean, we as board members have constituents that we are responsible to. They're the reason why each one of us sit around this dais. And I would say, out of an abundance of caution, I agree with Reverend McGaney, but I also hear Ms. Ray's input as well. And to marry the two ideas together, I don't know if staffing is available to do this, and Dr. Warnock, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if we have a director of community engagement, maybe we can have, like you were saying, the emails or the phone calls, they can call into that person. And during our board meetings on the agenda, when we do our announcements and committee reports, if Ms. Galloway could be the person to give us an update on the public's comments at that time.
Well, we'll have to bring this to the board.
Right.
Yeah, we would recommend
That goes to the board.
they go
for
to the board.
discussion.
This is what the policy committee
Because the
is.
board suspended it, so it's gotta go back for them to.
Right, and I'm not saying down the road we can't go back to normal, but I just think it's too soon, but I agree we do need to show some type of access and opportunity that we're making some type of attempt. So, you know, what you gotta keep in mind, if you get 35 or 50 email letters, we're not gonna read all of those letters that much. We're not gonna do it. So we really gonna have to make sure we think this thing through, because we don't need to open ourselves up.
Well, you could
For
do it like we
legalities.
did when they signed up, they could do a phone call and get themselves on there, and it's limited
So
by a certain time.
so are we gonna put a certain time? We know 15 minutes is allotted, so are we gonna allot 15 minutes for phone calls? Are we gonna allot, that's what I'm saying, are we gonna
Well, that was the total for everybody,
Right.
15 minutes.
15 minutes total set aside for public participation, and we gave them 2 minutes each? So y'all gotta help me in my mind figure this out. Y'all wanna open it up, tell me how we gonna do this, because I'm telling you right now, this is not the time to have no public participation. But if we gonna do this, y'all tell me how, help me see through this, because I don't see, what I see is us getting into a mess. That's what I see. Because this person gonna get mad and say, they didn't read my letter. They read this letter. How are we gonna determine y'all gotta help me understand that. Because if y'all got a clear cut hand, I'll be more than willing to support that, because I am for the public getting that back. But I
think
still
what-
say now it's not the time.
What my suggestion was that when they're placed on when Ms. Galloway is placed on the agenda to give us the comments that she's received, I don't think it will be reading in its entirety whatever the response is or whatever the phone conversation is with her. I think it would be more so a snapshot at this is what this letter says, or this is what this email says, or this is what this phone call was. I mean, how we handle public participation now is the public, prior to COVID, the public will come in, state their case to us, and at the conclusion, we will say we will get back to you. And I think that if we had a copy, or if it's loaded into Word docs for us to see all of their comments, and I think that was one of the biggest concerns, that if they were to send us individual emails, it might not go to every board member. And so then you have every board member responding something different. As opposed to it being loaded in, Ms. Galloway just giving us an update and say, we received an email from John Doe regarding X, Y, and Z, and the information is loaded for you in board docs. That way the public knows that we received their information, we can view it, and that someone will respond to them.
And every time we make it 10 people with the same question, and it can be combined where we have 10 people that sent in this same question about blah, 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 we would address the fact that these 10 people were sent this in, and this is the response to that. Because with the COVID, you got a lot of people saying the same question when their kids go back to school, how long they're gonna be in school. It's gonna be a lot of the same questions, but right now coming back in. I think that would be probably one of the things, if you get a lot of people the same question, we condense that and make sure we identify that, you know, we got this from all these people, and this is so and so and so and so and so and so, because as Mr. McGann said, it's going to become an issue because somebody's going to complain about not getting their response answered.
It's going to become an issue because every day I see messages coming to me from Ms. Hanson about COVID and how many staff is being quarantined. We got to keep in mind we got staff. What's going to happen if some of those letters can't get answered because we got staff quarantined for 10 days and 14 days, and the public gonna want their question answered as soon as we have our board meeting. There's a lot of factors that we need to take in consideration, just like what's gonna happen if, God forbid, whoever's responsible for answering the questions, what if they out on quarantine? I mean, these numbers are still, they appear to be going down, but people are also dying still. So that's where my mindset is still on the safety, the staff in the district who's still going out on quarantine. So I don't know. I mean, y'all just gotta help me if y'all think we need to go in that direction as far as opening.
Well, I think we need to, because the public wants to have a voice, and we've never been overrun unless there's something controversial coming up, when we might have a lot of people trying to sign up to speak, but then, you know, they knew that the more that did that, the less time they had, so we might need to, like I said, it just sounded like that conference, just about everybody was providing some avenue where the public could participate.
May I ask a question? Ms. Hanson, didn't we have something like this that happened way back when, before at some point, where we didn't have the staff coming in here?
Didn't have staff come in here.
Did we have?
It's my understanding that the policy would not change, just your mode of receiving the information would change, is that correct? So you still follow the same policy guidelines, which are, if it's more than the chairman has the authority to combine questions if there are more than one question on the same subject.
That's
And
what
it's
they
still
did.
15 minutes, so if Ms. Galloway were to read the responses,
She was
it would
set
still
at the
be,
same time.
yes,
So, okay,
yes.
cause I think we did that, that's what happened one time before.
Yes, sir.
So I think I heard it, they were to combine questions. Okay, but I don't know, we don't know how many we got questions we get taken in, so my question would be, if we get 20 or 30 questions in, Ms. Galloway gonna be the one to determine, I'm just asking, I don't know, cause we don't need to put Ms. Galloway in a position to get beat up as well, so,
Right, the chairman's authority is
so the
to
chairman would
go
be,
through those, to be read out. And
Okay.
then as well as, there is a document that's been, developed.
Mhm.
And that is can be sent out, and that's how they respond to public participation, just in a written format, if you're gonna do it in a written format.
Okay.
And it could be,
that'll work for you.
I think Mr. Galloway developed that a couple of years ago.
Who?
So, Shelley Galloway,
She did?
yeah, so she could just, if she were to expand on that,
Okay.
if that's what the board so chooses.
Okay, well, I think if we're gonna talk about Ms. Galloway, should we at least hear from Ms. Galloway? What do you think, Ms.?
So I have some thoughts, thank you, Reverend McGady. I think that as the person who is the contact for the community engagement aspect, what I don't want to do is to get her bogged down with taking phone calls, because that means it's keeping her at her desk and on the phone, and we're very mobile. I do believe that the community's voice is important, and we need to hear them. And so as you all were talking, my brain was working, and I know you saw the smoke, but what I was thinking is, Mr. Jones,
Yes,
can you create me an email account that is called Sumter Board or Sumter School Board? And then that form that we're speaking of, and I'm just putting this out here, food for thought. If we put the form out on our district's website, individuals could type on the document and send them to this email address.
Okay.
We would have to put the conditions in place that we will take, the first 10, 15, whatever the number may be that's agreed upon, and we will read them. However, the board will receive all the communication that was submitted, because the information would be time-stamped. I do have concerns with individuals saying, I know I sent mine in on time, and they didn't read mine, but we have to remember we have 116, we have 16,000 kids, so, and you do 2 parents per child or 2 grandparents per child, and that would give you the number of correspondence. I do believe that creating an email address where they can send them to, they can be vetted and then organized and given to the board in total, in a complete folder, so that way you would get all of the feedback that was provided. But we would be limited with those that would be presented because of the time. And again, it could be multiple things, but I guarantee you that many of them would all be around the same subject. And so, but again, I don't wanna lock Ms. Galloway into being at her desk waiting for phone
Right,
calls
I agree,
or calling individuals back.
or getting her beat up.
And so, we can create an email account, we can post it on the website, we can create the form on the website, and they can just send it right to that email address. And again, you would get all the correspondence that we received. We'll set the time frame for the submission prior to the board, meeting being held. It must be submitted by whatever the timeline is, because it needs time to be reviewed and organized, and a response, of course, later on would be crafted, just as if they were here. They just present their concerns, and then there's a follow-up later on. And that's just my thinking out loud when you're
That
talking.
sounds good,
I like that.
that's access, I like that, so, see.
Ms. Galloway, you hear me talking about you?
Yes, ma'am, loud and clear.
Are you up for the task?
Absolutely, I've already been jotting down notes as well, and my brain is going to. We could do a PDF that you can edit directly and type into, or we could also create a link to a Google form that they can type onto as well, so we'll discuss the different options too.
Okay, so
But I think the biggest point is, regardless as to the format, we will post it and publicize it on the website. We will make sure our principals know to communicate it through EduLink, just to get the message out, and to understand that the correspondence that's sent is for specific board purposes only, and not to be used for any other purpose. But that's just my recommendation.
Yes.
And I would just add to that, the language that's in this policy about, the speakers, they're not permitted to any expressions of personal complaints or things like that.
Right.
Making sure that's
Calling names.
attached to this form, or it's on the form, or somewhere on the website for them when they go to fill out this form.
And I think this is an opportune time, Ms. Galloway, and you tell me if this is something that we deem is sufficient. We could also, to your point about not speaking about individual persons or personnel matters, and we need to put that language on the website and on the document as well. But just reminding individuals of the phone tree, or the contact that must occur if there is a concern. If it's an instructional piece with the teacher or grade, it goes to the teacher. If there's something that you've addressed and it has not been addressed in a timely manner, then you have the assistant principal and the principal. And if you're not getting the response, then there's the chief of schools, and then the chief of schools, the superintendent. And then if it gets to me and you don't get it, then, in most cases it would lead to the board, but, this is for overall district-wide feedback. So I think this is a great time for us to expand on the communications piece.
Any further discussion on 5.5, review a temporary suspension of BEDH, public participation at meetings?
Good.
Hearing none, we're down to item 6, steps moving forward. 6.1 is policies for further discussion by the policy committee. Under this section, I think the policy for further discussion by the policy committee will be the equity policy, as well as the school resource officer policy, that we are going to work in tangent with our superintendent and administration to come up with a policy to address those, or any amendments to those policies moving forward. And 6.2, policy to be presented for board approval for consideration. I think it's the language that we have added to before second reading on model policy BEDL, board members and electronic communication. Just streamlining that with the language that we use when we go into executive session. And for our public participation at meetings, that language that's on our public participation forms, as well as the creation of a email account, and the form to be available to the public so that they can submit their comments to the board to be heard during our board meetings moving forward.
So may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Before we get into the work, do we need to come up with the plan to take to the board, or do you want us to go ahead and begin this process before it goes to the board?
Can we do both? Can we take it to the board?
I see what the superintendent saying. We do need to make sure, we need to give the opportunity for the board members to have some discussions on it.
Yeah.
And go from there. We just need, how soon can, maybe let the chairman know, when.
I mean, we can outline the logistics for
Right.
the next board meeting,
Yeah.
Before we put this in place, because I know it does have to go back to the
Right.
full
An
board.
overview, because
Yeah.
we meet Monday.
Yeah.
We meet Monday, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we meet Monday, so, yeah.
Just have an outline. I don't want you guys to create everything and then there's a change Monday night. So,
You know how I am, I'm gonna be up and running by Monday.
so if we could get you, Ms. Galloway, to just start drafting that and have it available for discussion on Monday with the full board. If that's okay with the body.
That's good.
Did I cover everything for?
You wanna bring forward the policies for second reading?
Okay. And for second reading, we're also gonna bring before the board again SCASPA policy and legislative updates concerning lactation accommodation, the evaluation of instructional staff, educational equity, and the language for service animals, we're going to do emotional support / service animals. I got more knocks. For board consideration to do the title change of those policies.
I
If
have a
there's,
question, did we finish our discussion on facilities, or where do we stand with that? Were we gonna make some changes, or, you
That's
know, we
something
had
we can
somewhat of
include.
some discussion.
that's something that we can include on a future policy
Okay.
agenda.
Okay.
I guess if the administration has had time to work on it by then and bring something to us.
Okay,
Any other discussion before we move on? Hearing none, we're down to item 7, consent agenda. If there's no objection to,
That actually should say February 2nd, 2021.
if there's no objections to the February 22nd,
That should say February 2nd, 2021 is,
February 2nd, 2021
minutes, yeah.
meeting minutes,
Right.
they will
very
stand
good.
approved. And I'm gonna say that again. If there's no objections to the February 2nd meeting minutes, they will stand approved. Is there any objections?
No objection.
Okay. You know, those minutes stand approved. Now we're item 8, closing of meeting. Thank you again to the Sumter School District community, to the members of the policy committee, the administration, our staff that's joining us tonight. Thank you so much. And I look forward to the work that we're gonna do as collaborative partners to move this district forward from a policy standpoint. Thank you so much and have a good afternoon. This meeting is adjourned at 7.